research infrastructure-y, but not our studies. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and start introductions so you have plenty of time to talk. And those of you that haven't been to our meeting, you know that this is a longer than your usual meeting because we like to have a lot of conversation at the end. So we have this extra 30 minutes we tag on. If you can't stay that long, we get it. Yeah, people have obligations, but one of the really great things about this research seminar is how many collaborations it has fostered. And it happens right here, happens with these talks. People find out that there's some really amazing people around the university, and before you know it, you get a whole nother bunch of research studies going on. So stick around, hang out with us. So I'm going to say that this one is a tag team talk that we have Dr. Cavanaugh, Dr. Ownby, and Dr. Hardigan speaking today. And they are, so I'm just going to give a little background. Dr. Cavanaugh's in the Department of Nursing, in the College of Nursing, the Ron and Kathy Asaph, my very dear friends, College of Nursing. It's kind of nice. And Dr. Cavanaugh and I have known each other now for quite some time because we are always trying to further the research mission here at NSU. Anyway, her research focus has been on big data analytics and analyzing genomic data, health data, public health data to get the synergy between those large data sets. With respects to analytics, she's using her methodology to identify ideal statistical tests that analyze data sets. Her research interest also includes student success and student productivity, and her goal is to continue to identify factors that contribute to student academic success. And she's been teaching and advising in higher education for more than 10 years. And I know her through a number of different types of collaborations. Now, Ray Ownby, I'll give a personal detail on because Ray was in the room that recruited me. And I remember distinctly that he was the one that said that I would only be working 37.5 hours. What a joke was that? Ha, 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 ha. Very, very funny. I'm getting paid for 37.5 hours, but I am definitely not working 37.5 hours. So thank you, Ray, for putting the university in such a good light. Anyway, Ray is the chair in KPCOM of psychiatry. He does neuropsychology. He's actually, he and I have had a lot of parallel worlds because he has worked in P&I and psychoneuroimmunology, HIV research. Some of my early work was in that area. He's published more than 200 papers, and every time he tries to retire, he gets another grant. So I can relate to that as well. So there you go. So he was one of my colleagues at back before he came to NSU, and he was one of the guys that convinced me that NSU was a great place to land. So there you go. Oh, and he's a really cool book on his website. So check out his website. It's coming out. Sharper Minds, Better Lives, Step-by-Step Guide with Cognitive Model. And I downloaded it already, and you sent it to me. Thank you very much. My brain. That's great. I'll lead the pack. And then Patrick Hardigan just wants me to say Patrick Hardigan, but I'm going to say more than that because Patrick's been the guy that they call on whenever they need another serious leader to take on another big hat. And so he has so many titles that we couldn't list them all. But he has, from the beginning of time here at NOVA, led the charge to try to create a core and excellent biostats and study design core. And he has been increasingly successful. So that's great. He's got hundreds of papers, and he's working with us and many others on different projects. In fact, he and I have two completely different types of projects we're working on together. So I will call that an introduction. So who's up first? Dr. Cavanaugh is going to lead off the group on detection of higher cognitive load and its association with low health literacy and poor grip strength. Here you come. Oh, should I introduce anybody else? No, good. Okay.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. And so I listed the individuals who've been part of this project, and as well as some of our students who have been a tremendous help to ensure that we continue to collect data, analyze data, and everything else. So Dr. Ownby and Dr. Hardigan have been a tremendous help to assist me to continue to do these studies and improve it and make it better and even collect more data as time goes by. I'm not sure how much the audience knows about premature aging and about the homeless population, but I'll just give you a brief background, basically, because we're mainly healthcare and biosciences and biomedical. So the homeless population, especially in Florida, in the southeastern areas, it's growing in numbers. And usually these individuals do not take care of themselves for the main common reasons that we all know. And what happens is that they wait until things are worse, and then they go to the emergency room to get care, and then they go back into the same situation. So we look at various aspects of the homeless person. And if you look at the literature as well, you see that the homeless person experiences something that is called premature aging. Mainly that can occur at the biological level, physiological level, and as well as by looking at the person. So premature aging can also happen in the physical aspect, whereas those individuals can start experiencing geriatric conditions even at an earlier age, such as frailty, falls, and as well as incontinence, and so on and so forth. And the homeless population also has something, and which is the part that Dr. Ownby assisted with us with this project, is the health literacy. So of course they have low literacy to begin with. So imagine they also have poor health literacy. So they have a high prevalence of poor health literacy, meaning that they cannot comprehend what their physicians or the medical providers are telling them. So imagine that person goes to the emergency room, they have no PCP, they have no primary care provider, and they go to the emergency room to be taken care of. And what happens with a low health literacy, you can think of what happens, because physicians before would prescribe medications to them, and they will tell them, okay, go on your way, take care of yourself. But with the low health literacy, that is a main issue. That is a problem, because they do not understand what to do, and they do not understand the prescriptions or what is given to them. These individuals, again, they have low, and they have a lot of exposure, not low, but extreme exposure to stress. And these stress are a magnitude of different environmental and social factors. Mainly, these individuals would experience such as they have certain things that happens to them financially. So they would think of these issues, and they amount to everything. And they are also exposed to a lot of noise, which is called noise pollution. And they are in homeless shelters, they're moving from one place to the next, and they are also experiencing separation from family, from children, from everything else. So they are exposed to a lot of stress, and that is, we call chronic stress. And some of them can be traumatic stress, in that they never have the chance to really resolve those stress. So they become an issue for them. So they do have a lot of issues with information processing because of the high stress that is happening, low health literacy, low education, and a lot of things happening. And that, again, make them more susceptible to a poor decision making. We also looked at physiological and biological marker of aging, and as well as cognitive health. One of the markers we collected, we're not going to be presenting the data today, is on telomere length. So telomere length has been a marker of wellness and as well as longevity. Individuals from the scientific community have been looking at telomere length as a way to see how healthy some populations are and how well they are doing, as well as in biological and as well as physical aspects. And we have presented this data in neuroscience as well as in other conferences, and we have a publication waiting for it. So for this study, and specifically, we looked at 65 adults who were experiencing homelessness. Basically, those individuals were sheltered homeless individuals. They were not on the streets, but at the time that we collected data from them for the study. It doesn't mean that they were not on the streets before, but the recruitment happened in the homeless shelters around the area. And we also were able to recruit individuals who were experiencing housing instability. The reason why they were not classified as homeless for the study is because they were in a home, whether it was from a parent or a friend. They were jumping from house to house, but they were recruited from the soup kitchens. So they had a place to live, which was not a stable housing, but they were getting foods and taking a shower in a soup kitchen area. Then they were compared with a group of control individuals that were from stable housing, that were, more stable, I would say, financially, that had a home and were chronically involved in a stable housing condition, and they were used as our control group for this study. Health literacy was assessed using the Fostering Literacy, Good Health, and it's a long name, which is we call the FLIGHT VIDAS tool. And this was a tool that was developed by Dr. Ownby, and he will go further in detail when it is his turn about this tool. We again assess cognitive function using the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Test, and as well as a comprehensive choice-making test. Other tests can also assess cognitive ability, but I opted to use the MoCA because it was a more valid test for that group, and because of the pictures and everything else, so it was better to assess that group strategically. We used a Tobii eye tracker in order to look at the individuals to see where they were looking at and to assess their response using the FLIGHT VIDAS tool, as well as on the MoCA tool as well. And that eye tracking device gave us an idea of how much processing those individuals were doing. And it also allowed us to look at eye movement, pupil size, and as well as a saccade, and as well as fixation data from those individuals. So basically, just to give you a background, if an individual is having a more difficult time understanding a word, they would spend more time looking at it, and they would, again, their pupil will constrict more because they're thinking more. Or if I give somebody a math problem or statistical problem, and you're having a difficult time trying to come up with the answer, so you will have more cognitive load because your brain is working overtime. And so that also will be visible in the pupil size as well. And then we opt to measure grip strength with a handheld dynamometer. And then we do all those data that were collected, they were exported to SPSS, and they were also, and Dr. Hardigan was our big data person, and did a lot of the analysis using R. We collected blood as well as saliva from those individuals, mainly because the blood samples wanted to look at telomere length in a subset of the samples, but they are very expensive tests. So we were not able to do everyone. So we obtained a subset of the population of the sample to conduct those tests on them. The saliva was collected to examine cortisol levels and to see how stressed those individuals were in comparison to the control group and those individuals who were from unstable housing. And now Dr. Ownby is going to go a little bit more into the FLIGHT VIDAS tool. Thank you.
Yeah, the FLIGHT VIDAS health literacy measure we developed here. In fact, where I'm standing, where our offices used to be over there at UPP, it's now part of the parking garage of the hospital. Those were the days, yeah. Anyway, I won't talk too much about it. Just that, it was a long iterative process. This was a 5-year project. We started out with a baseline 200 items, worked through psychometrics. They were the items were tested cognitively. We did cognitive interviews, tested on people. Eventually, we wound up with about 500 people that generated norms. And that diagram there is just from the original article talking about the how we did it. It's administered by a touchscreen computer. That used to be state of the art, that computer. And they're still working. We still have them over at CCR, amazingly enough. That lower picture is an item of, a screen capture of one of the items where people actually, rather than responding to a multiple choice test, they just had to tap on the screen to show something. And so that we were assessing their understanding of medical content as well as reading and so forth. And if anybody's interested in this, there's a FLIGHT VIDAS website. which I just realized I didn't put the URL for. But I did manage to get a QR code, as so Dr. just so I'm getting there anyway. It's flightvidas.org. If anybody's interested, the reason I mention that is because that website has all of the original development articles as well as the test manual. If somebody's interested in using it, I'd be very delighted to work with you, since we spent quite a long time developing it. Been used everywhere from Thailand to Europe and Africa at this point. And it's back to Dr. Cavanaugh. Dr. Klimas was asking about how long it takes to administer. There's a 10-item screening version and a 20-item version, and they take roughly a minute per item. Some people take a lot longer. There are people that just obsess over the answers, and some people, like as what happened in Dr. Cavanaugh's study, some of the items are kind of difficult, and that people get discouraged and just skip or guess.
Correct. So it takes about, yes, you do. Yeah. So it takes about 10 to 15 minutes in order to for a control group to complete it. And if there are any questions in the chat, will we be able to tell? Because I cannot tell here. I guess we'll check later. Okay. So now let's go to the results, and because I guess that's the most interesting piece, and to see after you collect all this data and what is happening. This one is a result from the MoCA test, and some of our students are familiar with it because it is in their curriculum. And basically it is to assess somebody's cognitive ability. There are other ones such as the old one, MMSE, which is a mini mental scale. And that one, and individuals who are highly educated, they can beat that test. And I found that out with this one as well. Some individual, not with the MoCA test, but with the Hopkins verbal test, individuals that are highly educated and who can use different strategies in order to remember certain things, they will do it in order to beat the test. And so, but I did not find this out with the MoCA. So that means that it was able to assess an equivalent, all three groups, the homeless individuals who are from the control group, and those who are from unstable housing. So basically what the test asked them here in the visual executive functioning piece is for them to do a trail making test. So they want them to come from A and then go to 2 and then to the letter and then to a number again and then to the next letter and so on and so forth. So the idea is a person is supposed to keep their pencil or pen on the paper and go through it and then finish rather quickly. And then the next thing was they had to copy a cube. So the cube that they see here, they had to mimic and do it exactly as they see there. This is one of the individuals from the homeless population. So what we decided to do is to have them do it on a pencil and then as well as on the computer, mainly because some of the individuals, they are not computer savvy. So we wanted to eliminate and control for the fact that using a mouse or using the computer was difficult for them. And if you can see here, this person did this test on the computer and as well as with a pencil. So they do it with a pencil first. And you can see they're missing the same thing that they're missing in both places. So they repeated the test within 10 minutes or so. And I'm not sure what was going on here. I'm not a cognitive science person, or I'm not a psychiatrist. However, and you can see this person repeated that and they ignored the numbers here. And there are certain things happening here. So if they do not do everything correctly, of course, they do not get the full score. So they will get out 3 points for this, and then we total the score at the end. And if you need to know more about the MoCA test, you can just Google it, and then you can find out more on what is included. And so this is in comparison to someone, and I'm getting a feedback. It's good? Okay. And then this is a control group, and and drawing the cube and the numbers. So what we do, and then again, this is a repeat of a person from the homeless population. So they try to draw the cube here, and they get a totally different figure as opposed to what is supposed to be on there. And you can see how the person draw the clock on here as well, and how they clearly make a mistake while they're trying to do the trail making test, and then they go back and then try to do it again. And this is someone from the homeless group as well. You can clearly see that they would get points for this because they draw all the parts of the cube, and then they also did the trail making test. And this is someone from the control group. I also gave them points for this, for drawing the cube on the opposite side, just because while I did the training, this was not, I think the person just thought they could just draw it that way on the opposite side, but they included all the bars and everything on there, except that they didn't include the numbers on here. So when they were doing the FLIGHT VIDAS test, as well as the MoCA test, again, they had the eye tracking device in front of the computer. And like I said, we use the Tobii Pro Nano, which is not the glasses that you wear, but instead it is an eye tracking device that is stuck to the computer at the bottom, and then it's recording every person's eyes. So of course, it calibrates to the person's eyes, and then they start the session. So we divided the sessions into 8 frames. So the MoCA test, and as well as according to the difficulty of the question sets in the FLIGHT VIDAS, we break them down into different frames so we can see when can we compare the mean of the pupil size of the individuals in the different frames and see when that is changing throughout the time. So we compare the mean standard deviation for each one of the frames. And so this is basically a person looking at the screen, and this just gives us numbers, different values of when they initially started looking at the screen, all the way to when they click next to go to the next question in the FLIGHT VIDAS. And this is just basically a heat map of the same question that they were all seeing. So basically, I wanted to show you a brief video of what is happening on the first one. And you can see here, this is a person from the homeless population in there. So what we observed is the scattered pattern of how they are assessing the question in order to answer it, and quickly going to the next question without really committing and looking at those questions. This is a person from the control group, and you can see this person has a better strategy to read the questions first, and then look at the clues that are given, and then go back and then look at, and I'll pause this one, and then look at the questions, the responses, and then go back and then get more clues, and then take their time and more strategically look to see how can I answer this question better. The individuals from the homeless population, they started off good, and by questions number 15, 16-ish, or the 20th, they started guessing more. And then you can see at that time that their pupil size, or the movement of the questions, it moved faster. So that's where we wanted to really look at cognitive load in those individuals, basically to go back and explain that aspect of it. If you put a light in someone's eyes, for medical professionals, you know that the eye does constrict. So the experiment design is to ensure that there's no light changing either in the room, that there's no window, and that there's nothing, so that the light stays constant. So we control for any changes in the pupil that could happen because of lighting change or because of colors. You have to ensure that the colors, the screen is basically the same, and that you're getting the same lighting throughout. When we do that, you can assign that any changes that is happening in the pupil, either dilation or constriction, that is happening because of the stimulus the person is receiving. We're also doing the same study in children with autism, except we're not looking at cognitive load, but we're looking at arousal. So if someone is aroused, they see somebody they love, and they see something, of course, the pupil is going to expand. It's going to open and dilate. But if it is with, like I said earlier, with a math exam or a math question, then it will constrict because there's more cognitive neuronal activities that is working in order to answer that question. So you have more cognitive load. So we're looking at baseline pupil size in both groups. So both groups had around similar pupil size when they first started taking the FLIGHT VIDAS test. And then as time went by, we started seeing that the homeless individuals, there's more progressively, of course, the test is harder, more difficult for everyone, but that the homeless individuals were, experiencing more cognitive load and more, their pupil was dilating more in the different and more difficult questions. And like I said, we account for guessing because at some point you will see that it is going up and down where all of a sudden on question 20, for example, you'll see that we're experiencing a low pupil size such as 1.2. And then all of a sudden you'll see that the pupil size went back to 4.2 millimeters. And you said, okay, that's not. And we see that inconsistency more in the homeless individuals as opposed to the individuals from the control group. So there was an inconsistency in the way they're looking at the pages in the slides as well in the questions. So we did see a significant difference, statistically significant difference as the individuals move through the frames. Again, more guessing events and more disorganized or eye patterns in the homeless population. And then for the FLIGHT VIDAS tool, even though they were guessing, they were not getting the questions correctly. So we definitely saw that we had a mean score of 11.34 in the homeless group, and then a 27.57 in the individuals from the control group. So the guessing really, so there was no informative guessing or as we do in order to guess appropriately for a question, they were just guessing the questions. And then for the MoCA scores, we could also see that the homeless individuals had lower MoCA scores, and then in comparison to the control groups. And then for grip strength, we also noticed that they had lower grip strength in the homeless individuals versus those from the control group. And this is something that hasn't been explored before, to look at undocumented, probably cognitive delay in the homeless population or cognitive impairment, because when we were assessing them, we'll say, okay, do you have dementia? Do you have this? Or has a doctor ever said that you have this condition? No, I'm perfectly fine. And another thing that we also noticed that we did not report here is assessing their stress level. So we used the Beck anxiety questionnaire. And when we said, are you having tingling? Are you experiencing this or that? The majority said no. So they'll do a whole scratch of, no, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong. I don't experience this, and I'm not anxious, and I don't have an anxiety. And these are the same individuals who live in polluted noise population, that there may be gunshots sometimes, and that the Jackson Memorial Hospital is nearby and there will be sirens all the time. And they said, we don't have any anxiety. So we need to, we consider this. Is it that they are having a false belief about how anxious they are, or that they're not really anxious, that they're so used to it that it no longer matters? So this is something we probably need to explore and then consider. Thank you. That we probably need to consider perhaps a different collaboration to see who want to study and look at this further. And we looked at the different time, as Dr. Ownby mentioned earlier, of those individuals completing the test. And the individuals from the homeless population, they actually spend longer time, even though they guess and move faster, they spend longer time doing that, the FLIGHT VIDAS test as well. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then the other question is dilation. Mm-hmm. We would have the set up the study design that way, and that's something that we did not include. And I know for one of them, our future studies that we have planned is to have the EEG, brain to collect that data from the homeless person as well. So we would have to set up the screen where it's a gray screen, and we ask them to do different things before we get to the FLIGHT VIDAS. So it will involve different components in order for us to assess that. But I said, yes, definitely we'll be able to assess it, but we'll have to have a perfectly study design, experimental design for it. But right now, this does not permit for us to do this. So. Yes. Yes. And actually in our study that involves the children with autism, that's one of the things we do. So we have a stressor where we show them like a baby crying, and then different things. And then the next phase, and then we have a gray screen. So we have different experiment design, and then you have a gray screen and you say, well, close your eyes, or there's a lullaby playing. And then the next screen is a gray screen. And then after that, you show them something peaceful, like a puppy or like a kitten. So things that you know that they like. So we can definitely test for it, but you just have to have the right way of, collecting the data. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cavanaugh. This is my small part of contribution. So one of the questions that Dr. Klimas mentioned was the significant amount of within subject variability, because there's so much variety on the experiences of the homeless. Some could be transitioning, some could have been unsheltered, moving into the shelters. So one of the things we wanted to look at is the variability. And so you can see in the little gray, those are the means, and the variability are the error bars. And statistically, there was no difference in the mean size of the pupil diameter, but there was significant difference in the amount of variability within each test. And so the trail for each of these, I guess you can't see online. So the cube, the clot. And I think this is very instructive because it just shows the variety of experiences that the homeless would bring into the test, amount of variability. Now, we did account for this using serial correlation. This is similar, think of a time series analysis. But even in capture and controlling for that, you can see there's significant amount of more variability. So I feel that's very instructive, and what that leads to is kind of confirms what Dr. Cavanaugh had mentioned is how this can work out in terms of future studies and current studies. So that's my small contribution. Thank you. I'm going to be first author.
Yes, and one of the many. And what he was in, I believe that's Dr. Ownby next, but in the previous slide, in what Dr. Hardigan mentioned, so we do want to account for this group and future studies. And like I said, we're working on really doing an experiment design where we can look at brain activity and look at the EEG from the homeless while they are doing this, and see what's happening in comparison to the pupil size changes as well. And I think Dr. Ownby, that's your piece.
I'm back. One of the things that's been interesting to me for a long time, and I hope it doesn't bore you too much, is why we bother with grip strength. It seems like such a seemingly simple measure, and it's used a bit in geriatric assessments. Some of you may know geriatric medicine assessments, along with things like walking time. And those are amazingly, to me, because it does seem like an awful simple, easy kind of task, related to both executive functioning, which is kind of like that trail making part of the MoCA that Dr. Cavanaugh showed you. It is an early indicator of cognitive decline, which is why I worry about my grip strength. And it's associated with overall and brain health. So these are just some data from the, this was the mobile app study, the one that we finished a couple of years ago. I just looked at the relationship here. It's colored trails. I guess people on Zoom can't see, but I'm pointing to the top of the graph, or excuse me, the figure, just to point out what it was. Colored trails, again, is very similar to the trail making part of the MoCA, and grip strength. So you see that in this case, a higher score on trails, that is, means that they took longer to do the task. So it's actually a poorer. So once again, just that there is a fairly substantial, it's significant. I mean, 0.17 is an enormous correlation. And those are partial correlations. We have to correct grip strength for gender, and I was doing stuff with walking speed too, and you have to correct walking speed for height. If you think about it, tall people tend to walk a little faster than shorter people. And then here's something similar. We scored in this study people on the Fried frailty markers. And again, grip strength is related to the number of frailty markers. People having more of these frailty markers are more likely to be frail. And finally, it's overall health. Yeah. So this was the total health conditions. We did an interview with all these people about how many health conditions they had. They had to have at least one chronic health condition to be in the study. The average was about 6. These people were all over 40 and low socioeconomic status. But again, we see pretty substantial and certainly significant correlation with grip strength. So that's why grip strength is a good thing that Dr. Cavanaugh included in her study, from my point of view. And finally, oh yeah, working memory. This is digit span backwards from the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. If you're not familiar with that, what you do is you say a series of numbers forward, like 3, 6, 5, and the person has to say 5, 6, 3. And as you go along, you give them longer and longer series of numbers. And here again, working memory being a really key functional part of just general memory performance. You don't have working memory, it doesn't get stuck in a long-term store. And here again, we see a fairly substantial relationship. So I think that was the last one of mine. Yep, there you go. Dr. Cavanaugh.
Okay, I think we're done. So, and basically, what we look at, I think that fields for many other studies and many other questions that we can ask and hypotheses and looking at the homeless population per se. And I think this is an interesting population to study. They have so many comorbidities. They have so many things that are going on, and they such as stress, looking at stress on those individuals, and that propels us to look at mainly executive functioning and what you mentioned, and look at those individuals. Maybe they have so many undocumented conditions that they themselves don't know about because they don't go to their physicians. We know basically if they have diabetes, high blood pressure, these things they would know for sure. But there are other things that I think we can assess in the homeless person, and mainly health literacy is a big deal. It's a big thing that I believe our college, the College of Nursing, we're addressing extremely right now. Is if you have patients and they don't understand what you're saying, what do you do? So, and how can we really close the gaps to address patients' health literacy to make sure that they understand, so they do not keep on coming back or they don't get worse. So they need to get better, and that is one aspect of this. And I would like to thank the audience and also some of my students who are here that participated in this study and help us to look at some of the data and then put them together to get them to Dr. Hardigan and so on and so forth. And I would like to thank the HPD Research Grant and President Grant, and as well as the PFRDG and then the colleges that are involved in this study. And again, my student researchers and the INM that ran some of the saliva samples for us for cortisol analysis, even though we didn't report them here. But the INM was very instrumental to run a lot of these samples for us as well. And we still have some of our samples in your freezer. Yes, thank you.
Can you talk for a moment about the demographic, the educational?
Actually, we had individuals from the homeless population that had a college education, that graduated, and even with that, they still had some of those low skills that we saw, and then the low grip strength and then low scores on the MoCA. So because this was such a small sample, we could look at this on a case basis as well. So of course, the control group had a little bit higher of education than the homeless population, but like I said, some of them also had higher education, and some of those from the control group did also have just a high school diploma, but they did better in a lot of those indices and those measures as compared to the individuals from the homeless population. But before we ask questions, Dr. Ownby wanted to share the book, and we can give some of the students some time to take a picture of the QR code, because I'd like for them to download it as well.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks everybody for allowing me to plug this. But as some of you know, I've done talks on brain health for the community for a number of years, and just put it all together in ebook that is absolutely free. That's as in free. If you go to see, I did manage to get the URL for that, which is just cogstim.com, but or you can scan the code. As Dr. Cavanaugh advises me, many people would prefer to do that these days. Anyway, that's all. If anybody has any questions, you can contact me, certainly. Thanks.
We're taking questions?
Yeah, so I can ask a question. So there is a YouTube channel called Invisible People, and it's run by a guy who was formerly a homeless person, and now he travels around the world and does interview with homeless people. Among other questions that he asked is, what happened to you that you're now homeless? And I was fascinated about the breadth of different responses from those people. Does the reason why someone became homeless may actually impact on any results that you guys are collecting, and ultimately the sharpness of the mind?
Mm-hmm. And when you ask why does the person become homeless, it's usually why do they stay homeless? Because a lot of individuals, they become homeless, but then they pick back up and then they go and then they're better. But in those individuals, the majority of them were homeless for like 15 years or so. So it's like they were within that chronic homelessness and alcohol abuse, medical conditions, and there was no one who was a handicap or in a wheelchair that I could. Usually, these are some of the reasons, but mental illness is a big thing of why individuals remain homeless. But they would not be allowed to be in our study anyways if they had mental illness and they couldn't consent to be part of it. So they would be excluded. So these are the reasons, the main reasons that we think of, like alcohol abuse, mental illness, and then handicap. I don't know for sure if any of those things, beside those that I just mentioned, if they contribute to the results that we see. Of course, one of the questions, when we ask some of the questions, what do you do to relax? So one of the questions in our questionnaire was, what do you do to relax? And some would say casually, oh, I take drugs, I drink. So why wouldn't I do that? And I listen to music, but I mean, they were speaking, then the executive functioning, they can do some of this. Most of them were able to pinpoint and do. I think one of your questions had a math problem in it. They see the numbers and they're literate enough to comprehend certain things. So I'm not sure if what made them homeless and stay homeless contributed to those results in here. But Dr. Hardigan has a better answer than I do.
Not necessarily better. So for about 16 years, I worked with the Broward County for our homeless count up until COVID. And it was interesting statistics, typically about no matter what the intervention was, Broward County, state of Florida, HUD gives more money to help recidivism, to reduce homelessness. It always was consistent about the numbers stayed fairly consistent, would go up a little, down, up a little, down a little, but never really, I would think, enough to you would see a big impact. And it was always about a third were unsheltered and 2/3 were the sheltered. Now, sheltered meant transitional, where Dr. Cavanaugh was, or moving from place to place. People living on couches or temporary or living in their cars would be considered to be unsheltered, place not met for habitation. But it's interesting that no matter what, and here's one of the big take homes from the global part, not necessarily from this project, is despite the numbers and dollars invested by Broward County, and they made the Broward County Coalition for the Homeless really did important projects and really made a good effort to try to reduce homelessness, and it had a marginal effect. And so the question is, why is that? Overall, why was the reduction so little? And that's still, I think a lot of the social scientists and a lot of the government political scientists still have to figure out ways to prevent homelessness and then trying to transition those individuals out. Going back to Dr. Cavanaugh's project, she did wonderful work in terms of organizing this. The question, of course, was background experiences. So Dr. Beljanski asked, what is their experience? It's hard to capture. Were they unsheltered for 2 years and then moving into the shelter? And then what were their experiences prior to that? Or were they ready, maybe their mental health was going to drive them back to being unsheltered? So the question is, that's why we are statistical analysis, try to account for that variability within each subject. So, but it's a fascinating subject, and there's lots of different projects, programs going across the United States. And I'm not sure if I can remember, of course, it's been 4 or 5 years now, if anything really had a dramatic effect on reducing homelessness.
Thank you. So I was wondering if the homeless population versus
Mhm. Mhm.
We didn't ask that question. We didn't ask if they were veterans or what they were before. And we also did not test for, we didn't give them any stressors because this was not a intervention or experimental study. But then if we were to do that, then I would have had to have a psychologist or somebody in my team, if something were to happen, that they can really calm the person down. And I think that is, yeah. Yeah. But if you, how do you account for PTSD if I didn't ask them if you don't have a variable or within that, the screen that they're watching, that's something, like, for example, if I expose them to, let's say, a battle scene, then I would be saying, I want to know how they respond to that. Um, but
Mhm.
correct. Yes. Mhm. We could. So we could definitely use a self-report, and we can like withdraw blood before, and we can definitely do that to see did they take anything before they do this test, and we can definitely ask them, did they take any alcohol or drugs or anything that could affect the pupil size? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But yes. Mm-hmm. 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 Correct.
Over the last 20, the definition of homelessness by HUD was over the last 24 hours, were you living in a place not meant for human habitation? So that would be the unsheltered people. The sheltered, then they would go around to each of the sites, the different, what are they called, hacks, homeless assistant, I can't remember the title, but for the specifically unsheltered. So the problem with that is, and there was a lot of criticism of it, Broward County schools would say, we have more homeless children than what you're reporting. And that's just a measurement issue. because they were at, I think, twice as many as what Broward County was talking about. So it is a measurement issue. It's a research issue, really, from a community effort to try to bring that information into how you're looking. And I will say, from the veterans, towards the end of my participation, there was more and more emphasis on reducing homeless from the veterans. They made a concerted effort. Every year they want to know immediately how many veterans and could we tell them who they are. The problem is a lot of those surveys, there was trying to be some confidentiality, especially of the unsheltered. So, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And we did collect the cortisol, but I mean the saliva to assess stress level, but not from all of them. And just because we didn't have the funding, didn't call for us to collect saliva to process for everyone. And but I think some in the subset we do see minor, significant, higher cortisol level in the homeless population, but not so much high that it's significant in comparison to the control group. And I think looking at how stressed in another thing we're trying to do as well, which is difficult, and we haven't thought of how to do that, is because cortisol level in the afternoon, of course, is different from the evening and morning. So we wanted to find a way that we can ask them, give them the tubes, and they collect the cortisol themselves at night and in the morning, and then when we come to do the assessment, we pick it up from them and then give it to them. But that's in the future, but we haven't been able to do that piece yet.
Don't worry. I've read in the too many years, that majority of homeless people in the United States are veterans. And what you said completely makes sense, the exposure and everything. Is this a uniquely American thing or not? Because veterans is another society as well. And the toxic exposure might be somewhat unique to American population.
Is it Dr. Hardigan?
Let's say, developed countries of Western Europe, industrially developed countries in other places, Canada maybe, are they also majority of veterans? I'm just curious why so many veterans in the United States are part of it. It's USA specific.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Correct. So all, yep. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I'm interested in amylase as well, just because I'm thinking if you I would like to, in one of the study that we do, the study design is exposed to a mild stress and nothing like, crazy that has maybe a fighting background, but mainly like show them like somebody on the street, panhandling and different things that may be mildly stressful, and then expose them to something that is relaxation and peaceful, like a vacation scene and so on and so forth. So I know that amylase responds faster than cortisol. So in such instances, I would love to do both. Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, I haven't been doing the. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Awesome. Think we're done? Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Right, do you close it?
I think I like Hardigan's system. I think.
Thank you.
Great.